Welcome to the Clause YouTube channel.
Together, we strive for a safer, secure, and more stable world.
Good evening and welcome to the Clause podcast. This is a very special podcast, as of some of you know. This is our Junior League champions who are going to talk on a subject of a lot of interest to most people today, is what Pakistan is up to. And the point of, I want to explain here, is the point of calling the younger league is that they have fresh ideas, fresh ways of thinking. So we would like to have them come into a debate which is usually dominated by the, the older people, where you have certain set ways of thinking. So let's hope the idea is to encourage not just our own academics who are Aishwarya's here, Akashika's here, Yuvvraj, and Anjali, but also the others who are watching. Try to think differently, try and think out of the box. And most of all, what we aim to encourage is critical thinking. Now, the thing is that Pakistan, of course, is always an interesting subject. As of now, it's got even more interesting with its newly minted field marshal making threats all over the place. And the latest, I think he said, is that he's willing to become, a martyr to the cause of Pakistan, which is extremely dangerous talk, which he said in Brussels recently. And considering it's a nuclear weapon state, that I would have thought should make most countries sit up and wonder what is going on. In Pakistan's history, I think there's only two generals before who've made such remarks. One, of course, was General Zia. But this is continuous, and he's been at it even before Pahalgam, and then he's gone on to make threats even worse. And all this, while Pakistan has offered up some 3 trillion it says 3 to 5 trillion in its rare earths and other minerals up for sale. The question is, who's going to invest in a country which threatens nuclear war every second day? So it's all very puzzling, and we are trying to unravel much of this. Aishwarya will address the West Asian role. Akashika, of course, will look at Pakistan. Anjali is going to look at Bangladesh because there is an evolving role there. And Yuvvraj, of course, will look at the ever-present US scenario, which is beyond puzzling. So let's start with this. Akashika, would you like to go on first?
Thank you so much, ma'am, and very good evening to everybody here and all of our viewers. Very, very glad to be on episode 2 of the Junior League. A little bit of context for our viewers and why we are discussing what we are discussing today is that Pakistan's Chief of Army Staff, Field Marshal Asim Munir, was in the US for the second time in as many number of months ever since Pahalgam happened, ever since Operation Sindoor happened. He was there to attend the retirement ceremony of now former CENTCOM Commander General Michael Kurilla. He has also, while he was there for about 7 days, he was also he met the chiefs of defense of friendly countries, quote unquote, and as well as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But what is more interesting and what brings us here today is the fact that some statements emerged from what is being called as a black tie closed event that was hosted by the honorary consul of Pakistan in Tampa. He is businessman Adnan Asad. Adnan Asad hosts this dinner wherein no phones are allowed, no video cameras are allowed, no media is there, so to say. But the statements that we get is from Praveen Swami from the print. And here is when we hear for the first time the most absurd comments come out of somebody who's a chief of army staff, somebody of that stature. The first one, and my favorite, being the most absurd analogy of Pakistan being a dump truck filled with gravel and India being a shiny Mercedes. The point the field marshal was trying to essentially make is the fact that when the two of them collide, who do you think survives, was the point that was trying to be made. But what I and we all believe that he failed to realize was how inadvertently it just showed the realities of the two South Asian countries, right? I mean, that is precisely the whole entire point. But more threatening and more that should make us think are a lot of comments that came about nuclear blackmailing. That is something that does not go well with India and should not go well with any countries, especially somebody and two countries who are so much at a rift with each other. And here is when I quote Field Marshal Munir saying, if we think we are going down, we'll take half the world down with us. Before I come to probably four major points that I want to make about why this is interesting and why we are talking about it, is the fact that a couple of other statements that have come in during this black tie event is Munir saying, we will wait for India to build a dam and then we will destroy it with missiles. One of them was that. The other one, of course, is the recurrent mention of Kashmir as Pakistan's jugular vein. And I'd urge the audience to remember that the last time jugular vein, the term was mentioned, was just a few days before the horrific Pahalgam attacks happened. And that is something that should not and does not sit well with India and should not sit well with the rest of the audience as well. Which brings me to probably four major points that I want to make here about why this is most definitely not okay and definitely something that warrants conversation. Number one, and first and foremost, is that such statements highlight the irresponsible behavior that comes from somebody who is the chief of army staff of a country, irrespective of whatever country it is. It just speaks to how there goes little thought behind what is being said and the effect that those words may have over time to the audience that it is being said to the world that it is being said to. Secondly, and more importantly, is the fact that it tells us how casually and how lightly nuclear blackmail is being taken by the Pakistani leadership. I would again want the audience to remember that way early, immediately after again the Pahalgam attacks, is when the Pakistani ambassador to Russia made similar comments and had similar nuclear blackmail and rhetorics being pushed against India, that we have missiles ready for you and we're ready for you whenever you want. What this basically does is tell us how they are again irresponsible and very casual and nonchalant with how they are talking about nuclear war as if it's just another thing, right? That is something, and that is something that is not okay and should not be taken down easily. Three, and most importantly, Munir's constant chest thumping, and there is a purposeful sectarian ideology that has extended beyond just ideology. When you say something like jugular vein of Pakistan and Kashmir, you are trying to again invoke the two nation theory and so on and so forth. It is not an ideology anymore. It is a strategic and a political tool that it is being used as. And that is not okay. Because while these ideologies are now converting into actual decisive tactics that are being used by the state of Pakistan. So while with age on his side and his tenure as chief of army staff till 2027, we can expect these kind of policies to be extended, and that longevity is a little bit scary and is a little bit not okay, especially when you're literally at the brink of war. And despite his talk of not wanting himself in politics and not looking at himself as the president of the country, that does not matter, because these are the kind of consequences and these are the kind of ideologies that it will be for South Asia and for the world as a whole. And lastly, and this is where the American angle comes in, and that's when I'll hand it over to my colleague, is if you look at the audience and if you look at the words that were said to this particular audience, it was not out of the blue. It was very purposeful. You are saying this on American soil in a third world country where you essentially don't have a demographic to call your own, so to say. So the fact that these words were uttered and they were taken not as seriously and as sharply as they should have been, they were applauded, they were not paid much heed to. I'm going to say yes, there were criticisms that came in from the UK. There were criticisms that came in from some members of the US Congress as well. But that said, it just points to a kind of a recalibration that we see in recent times of America towards Pakistan, be it oil deals, be it tariffs, be it the kind of just in general, do we call it friendship between the two countries, that seems to be re-emerging and blossoming. So it's not just you take Asim Munir's words at face value. There are multiple things, and these were from the top of my head, like the four major issues which I feel are something that would warrant conversation, and we can continue that further in the podcast.
Well, I sort of disagree with the fact that whatever Asim Munir says, what has he actually got from the US? All he's got is 395 million for his F-16 package, which is a technical package to prevent them from being used against India. So, and also, Akashika, maybe we could come back at some point to this very frightening statement where he says, God made me Pakistan's protector. I mean, where is that even coming from? That is downright scary. And he's when he says he's willing to be a this martyrdom. So I will hand it to Yuvraj. Yuvraj, let's look at this. Why? I mean, what is this whole U.S. Pakistan thing about?
Thank you, ma'am, and it's a pleasure to be here. Good evening, everyone. Ma'am, I think there are various ways we can look at this between the recent collusion between US and Pak. I think there are various ways we could look at this, but I think most of them have been covered by Akashika. But what I would particularly get our attention to is how he's interacting with basically the Pakistani diaspora and US. So if we look at what he's been saying, he starts off with a very provocative statement, and then he goes on to explain it in his own little religious, little out there, little provocative, and then he goes on to say basically he says stuff with a lot of undertones, and then after a while the diaspora engagement goes stronger. He goes from say business meetings to journalist meetings, and I think then obviously and then goes on towards think tanks as well. So I think there's a lot to learn where I think India can also learn from this in terms of how the track 2 is being used by leaders like Asim Munir to basically get an in not just in terms of economics and business, but also to major seats in the table, quite literally, with President Donald Trump. So I think more than anything, more than the number of deals or more than the number of whatever, the most important is how to get an in. And I think the track 2 has been really important and really significant when you see how US and Pakistan have colluded recently.
Yeah, I think those are good points, Yuvraj. I want to look at this through the West Asia lens. I mean, there is a lot of activity which we saw during Sindoor as well between Pakistan and Turkey, between Pakistan and a bunch of countries. This growing alignment between Turkey, Pakistan, Azerbaijan, China, and all of these people coming together. So it's a bit of what shall I say? It's not entirely. On the one hand, they're going to the US. On the other hand, there is this whole China angle. So Aishwarya, would you like to come in on particularly on the Turkey angle? Because I think that's where it gets really interesting.
Definitely, ma'am. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. Ma'am, I absolutely agree. I think throughout Sindoor, we could see the sort of positioning that Turkey had with Pakistan. But I think in the post-op Sindoor landscape, one of the biggest development that we're seeing is that between then and now, there have been the biggest development is the multiple engagements on a bilateral and a trilateral level between the different countries across West Asia. So you have Pakistan engaging with Turkey, then that expands to Pakistan engaging with Turkey and Azerbaijan, Pakistan Azerbaijan engaging. So that's one grouping. Then there has been a lot of interaction between Pakistan and Iran. I feel like that is a little bit of an overlooked aspect because a lot of things have also happened on the global scale to bring these countries together. I mean, the most recent thing that we can refer to is Iranian President Pezeshkian's visit to Pakistan. But in the lead up to that, there were several interactions recorded, and there was also the Israel-Iran 12-day war, during which there was a lot of communication, the US sort of using Pakistan to negotiate with Iran, even in the aftermath of that. So that is one aspect of it. During these interactions, there's also been talks of increasing collaboration between Pakistan, Iran, and Turkey. So there are these different groupings that are coming together and that are emerging in West Asia. Of course, there is the regular interaction of Pakistan with the UAE and with Saudi Arabia. But as Yuvraj pointed out, Pakistan has this ability to engage track to diplomacy, to engage media, and to not just sort of they talk about their engagements very loudly on all channels. So it's across social media, it's across diplomatic messaging, but it's also across local media. So you see this coming through mostly in Iran, where in the post-op Sindoor landscape, several Pakistani leaders, so you have Shehbaz Sharif, who visited Pakistan post-op Sindoor, who visited Iran post-op Sindoor. You have, I think, DJISPR also, and several other local leaders who are engaging with Iran, talking to their local media. which presents a sort of favorable image of Pakistan within Iran. Now, coming to Turkey, the immediately after Op Sindoor ended, there was this four-nation tour that the Pakistani PM, along with Foreign Minister Ishaqdar and Asim Munir, they undertook. And the four nations in this were Iran, Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Saudi Arabia. So when he visits Turkey, there's a lot of engagement with Erdogan. They talk about how Pakistan showed restraint during this situation, during the conflict with India. They also talk about deepening collaboration in defense, in intel sharing, and of course, several other aspects, which are, your energy, your trade, and all of that. Then there was the visit to Iran, which I will kind of come to a little bit later. Then there was a visit by the Turkish foreign minister and the Turkish defense minister, and I believe this visit was in July, that took place. So both these ministers traveled to Pakistan and they engage with the PM Shehbaz Sharif, they talk to Asim Munir. They also visit Pakistani Air Force headquarters, where they engage with their air chief. And they talk about the existing Turkey-Pakistan pilot training program. There is also, talks of expanding collaboration in defense, in aviation, in drones. And then there was a report by India Today that suggested that bases the performance of Turkish drones in Op Sindoor, there is Turkey and Pakistan are looking to towards a new drone deal. So, all these developments are happening. And at the recently held IDEF, which is the Defense Expo in Istanbul, there was a huge Pakistani delegation which engaged several Turkish firms to build defense deals. So that cooperation between Turkey and Pakistan, that's not going anywhere. That is only growing stronger. A third element of that that's getting added is Azerbaijan. So apart from the bilateral engagements between Pakistan and Turkey, there have been trilateral engagements. So Turkey, Pakistan, Azerbaijan are the three brothers. They also have a military exercise by that name. But in the post-Op Sindoor scenario, they held a proper trilateral summit in Azerbaijan, where they announced Azerbaijan announced a $2 billion investment in Pakistan, and they also spoke about how I think it was Erdogan that said that these are three nations and one state. So there's a real that trilateral is really solidifying, and that's primarily the engagement we see with Turkey and Pakistan.
Yeah, that's an interesting kind of development, isn't it? Which is coming up. I think we really need to watch how that goes, and also the fact that if you recall, Erdogan, the coup against Erdogan, I think way back in 2016, that was he got a lot of help from the Pakistanis, particularly the Pakistani Air Force, because the component which was trying to get him out was the Turkish Air Force. So there was a lot of. He's not forgotten that. And second, I think there is a kind of soft power aspect in terms of Turkish, they are soap operas or whatever you want to call them, their shows being extremely popular in Pakistan. And I think parts of India, surprisingly. There's a bunch of people watching them. Imran Khan was plugging Turkish serials, if you remember. But there's another trilateral which is very surprising. That is the China organized trilateral between Bangladesh, Pakistan, and China. This trilateral. So there are these different facets which are emerging after Sindoor, which foreign policy has to take into account. So, Anjali, would you like to comment on that?
Well, thank you so much, ma'am, for having me on this podcast, and good evening, everyone. Talking about what has happened post Operation Sindoor, I think it has not only intensified the already fraught India Pakistan conflict, but it has also served as a catalyst for a significant realignment in South Asia's geopolitics, specifically Bangladesh. So, almost after a 15-year break, Bangladesh and Pakistan foreign secretaries, they have met in Dhaka in April 2025. Senior officials have also spoken multiple times on deepening their bilateral relationship. Also, the first cargo ship in decades have traveled from Karachi to Bangladesh. Bangladesh's Navy has also joined the Pakistan-led Aman 25 multinational maritime exercise. So all this has happened before Operation Sindoor, and just a few days after Operation Sindoor, Bangladesh's chief advisor Muhammad Yunus has issued a very carefully calibrated, I'll say, diplomatic statement commending on the ceasefire agreement between India and Pakistan. He also recognized the crucial mediation effort of the United States helping with the peace talks. So now this statement underscores Bangladesh's a very neutral approach to maintain regional stability while avoiding alignment with either Pakistan or India during the escalating tensions. um, um, Pakistan's foreign minister Shagdar and Bangladesh advisor Toheed Hussain has also had important phone calls promising to build stronger ties. One big step that I would like to mention here was Pakistan sending rice directly to Bangladesh, something that has not happened officially since 1971. They also have started planning better trade routes, easier travel between countries, and even direct flights. Bangladesh has also announced recently, only in I think the month of July, to launch an online visa application system by December 2025 to make the process smoother for the Pakistani applicants. Also in May, I think, if I'm not wrong, Pakistan's private airline was also given clearance by the Civil Aviation Authority of Bangladesh to start direct flights between the two countries. So this is the second Pakistani airline to receive such approval in 2025 after Fly Jinnah gained, I think, clearance in February. Also, if we look back into the history, the last time direct flights operated between Pakistan and Bangladesh was in 2018. So the recent approvals very much represents a genuine restoration of direct air connectivity after a gap of 7 years. So all of this is a very much clear sign that two countries are getting closer after many years apart. Also, Pakistan has publicly referred Bangladesh as a long lost brother. And also, about what just Tara ma'am was saying, a major development happened on June 19th between Bangladesh, Pakistan, and China, where they had their very first meeting together in Kunming, China. So, where they actually, I think, decided to work together as a group on many things like trade, climate change, education, etc. So, this has shown that Bangladesh is actually looking to build partnership not just with Pakistan but also with China, and finding new ways to balance its position in that particular region. Further, if we analyze this cooperation, on July 23rd, I think Pakistan's Home Minister and Bangladesh's Home Affair advisor, they had high-level discussions. Also, Pakistan Deputy Prime Minister and has scheduled a two-day visit in the month of August as well. So all these high-level engagements, they actually signify that both countries, they are expanding their newfound partnership. So in short, if I had to say, I'll say that after Operation Sindoor, Bangladesh has moved from being a very careful observer to an active partner with Pakistan. Also, Bangladesh's interim government is balancing its relationship carefully, maybe due to internal politics. And this change is a big deal in South Asia, I think, because it is shifting old alliances. And Bangladesh is not no longer simply just aligned with India, but is actually actively engaging with Pakistan and China, thereby contributing to a very nascent bloc that could actually challenge traditional regional dynamics.
That's extremely very, very comprehensively done, Anjali. Very well done. But I have a slight difference with you. You saw the recent speech by General Munir, where he said, again, which we just quoted, where he said, we'll attack from the east this time. He said it. Then his spokesperson earlier also said the same thing, that this, if India gets, another time, that is another operation, we will attack from the east. That east obviously means they're going to attack from Bangladesh. Now, I don't see Bangladesh just allowing themselves to be used as a launch pad at the moment. So, in fact, recently you had the three chiefs lighting a lamp for Janmashtami. So I think Bangladesh, whatever the leadership may say, the Bangladesh themselves, the armed forces are playing a very careful game. I would ask Yuvvraj, how do you see the US role in Bangladesh? Because there's a lot of actors there.
Ma'am, if you look at how US has approached Bangladesh recently, it's mostly, I would say, mostly with an eye on China. Like most things US does, it's mostly with an eye on China. For instance, US is Bangladesh's top export destination. For US, Bangladesh is not just a strategic ally. It's not just a place where they can, make. It's not just a place where they can get things done easily. So for them, the economic sphere gets really important. For them, the garments market, especially the manufacturing, is very important. So even if you look at the tariffs that US is imposing on Bangladesh, it reflects that dynamic as well. So I would say that US's growing presence is basically twofold. One is obviously a softer and a more pliant government in Yunus and his team of student activists, and the second is with an eye on China, where particularly in the Arakan corridor, if you see, China has gained a lot of footprint in the Arakan corridor with an eye on strategic and ports access to Bay of Bengal. So to counter that, in a way, US has started to increase its presence both through official channels and through some channels that maybe tinge on the conspiratorial. But yes, I think if you look at the news coming out of Bangladesh, it's mostly US trying to balance its economic gains as well as strategic gains with an eye on China.
Wasn't there a report about a US aircraft landing with a bunch of CIA people on it? I don't know how true that is, but that is.
Ma'am, there were reports, but again, nothing confirmed from official channels. I don't think it would be very wise to comment on that.
Yeah, so but nonetheless, it's as well to flag this because it's not there. There have been a number of high-level US visits. I mean, in terms of officially, they are going there, which for us is not really a bad thing. If you're, I mean, there, that's okay. But the point that we are trying to get at is what is Pakistan's role in all this? What are they up to here? So you had the recent visit by DG Analysis to Pakistan, DG ISI Analysis. I mean, sorry, to Bangladesh with the team. That's also taking place. So let me dial back to what do we see the Pakistan role as given official statements, right? You saw the official readout, Aishwarya. I'm sorry, Akashika, on this, the Rubio statement with Foreign Minister there, where they're talking of Iran and counterterrorism. You had the recent counterterrorism readout, which was shocking because they brought out Baloch insurgency for the first time. I mean, the previous iteration didn't say anything about it. So it's something. So would you like to take that forward? Look, are they're using Pakistan for Iran? What is Pakistan's role here?
Absolutely, ma'am. And I believe Aishwarya will be the perfect supplement for me here because that's the West Asia lens. But from at least from the Pakistan's perspective, I think at least in their domestic rhetorics, this is counting as a win, which is seeming to be a little unfortunate because they seem to be getting rewarded for doing the bare minimum, which is protecting themselves, which is the whole point of it all. So when you have a counterterrorism dialogue with the US and you have the Majid Brigade get listed, for example, or restricted, and that has already happened in 2019, and then, like you said, there have been no mentions, so to say. So it seems to me, and it seems to me like it is the US rewarding Pakistan for attacks on Pakistan itself, which is the bare minimum of it protecting itself. So while the Iran angle, that is something that I'll let Aishwarya take on. But for me, it seems like the narrative that is built, that is counterterrorism, and this is not the first time we hear it. The now former, like I said, General Kurilla, we have also had him in session saying Pakistan is brilliant at what it does when it comes to counterterrorism. As the latest, and here is when I'd want to bring in Afghanistan, wherein we see the news coming in of 50 terrorists killed in Zob. This is just about 4 days ago. And with all of these counterterrorism tensions, you have all of this dialogue going on. But on ground, the day the listing of the Majid Brigade happened, there were massive attacks in Pakistan, on Pakistani soil, from a million places. I believe there was another, if I'm not wrong, the place is called Vashuk, wherein there were 8 or 9 Pakistani soldiers killed on the Iranian border. The same day, let's go up a little bit north, you have border clashes day in and day out on Durand like hinterland Pakistan, so on and so forth. So it is still we are yet to see how it translates on ground, but diplomatically and what they're channelizing their domestic narrative to be like is that it's a win, but we don't really know how much of a reality that may soon become. But about Iran, over to Aishwarya.
Aishwarya, please go ahead.
Thank you, Akashika. So, talking about the US, Pakistan, Iran angle, I think there's a paper from the Middle East Institute, and they put it very articulately. They said that Pakistan is very good at threading the diplomatic needle. So, what is happening is that during the Israel-Iran confrontation, we saw that Pakistan was completely in support of Iran with its statements, but the support was measured. So even during this conflict, there were just some reports that came out. I think it was an IRGC general who said that Pakistan has said that it will use its nuclear weapons to attack Israel if we are attacked. And Pakistan immediately denied saying anything like that. And it said that no, none of this will happen. Then you have General Munir going to the US and, having that entire conversation there. And Pakistan nominating Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. And then you have the US strikes on Iran. And without saying as much, Pakistan condemning those strikes. So Pakistan is playing a balancing role when it comes to Iran. And even during the recent visit by the Iranian, by President Pezeshkian, it was said that Pakistan is wanting to and is being used to play a role of negotiations between the US and Iran. Because, we know the JCPO deadline is approaching. We know a nuclear deal needs to happen quickly. And because Iran and the US are not talking directly, Pakistan is trying to play that role of a mediator. Talking about counterterrorism, yes, that has been a topic of discussion even between Pakistan and Iran. The Balochistan, that region is very active. And even during the recent visit, this was brought up. And this has been a bone of contention between between the two countries, even in the past. So they are actively trying to work towards it, but attacks continue to happen. So 2 weeks before the visit, there was an attack that killed at the courthouse that killed about 6 to 9 people. So these things are not ending. But on paper, Pakistan is positioning itself both as a mediator and as an active actor in the counterterrorism landscape. Yeah.
Yeah, see, my issue is this. I come to Yuvvraj on this. You saw that statement of the US-Pakistan statement on the counterterrorism. It's. I mean, it freaks out. It talks about Pakistan as this great country who has acted against working towards regional stability. I mean, that is a pointed statement which seems to be aimed at us. It's a equating of first and foremost the Majid Brigade, sort of designating that seems to be equating with the TRF. Okay, you've got the TRF, therefore you get the Majid Brigade. And here is an actual counter which has never ever targeted US interests. The Baloch have never ever, in the last, I'm talking of the Mujahideen days, have never hurt the US. So what on earth is going on?
Ma'am, I think I read it in The Economist somewhere where it was very rightly said that the transactional nature of the ties between US and Pakistan, it really suits Trump. It suits Trump's personality, it suits Trump's administration, it suits the way of his working. So Trump knows that he can get most of what he wants out of an administration and a guy like Asim Munir. If he dangles some sort of candy, some low hanging fruit, Asim Munir will pick it up. So I think the transactional nature does suit Trump, whether it's with regard to US's interest in Iran, Afghanistan, or whether it's just economic, whether it's just to balance India, whether it's just to attract China, attract Pakistan away from the Chinese, whatever it is. I think, ma'am, it's important to look at what each of them can give to each other. And I think, secondly, I think if you look at the recent oil deal or whatever you want to call it, I don't know how much of a smokescreen it is, how much oil there is really in Pakistan. But if you look at it, that is what they're trying to portray as if that the economics of the deal are the main bone. Although I don't believe how much of critical minerals or hydrocarbons as they have claimed are actually there. But yes, that is what they're going for. They're going for a mix of economics plus strategic interests. And I think when it comes to hard power, I think the US military having had the experience of working with the Pakistani military and CENTCOM for decades, has a much easier and a much more familiarity with working with the working style of the Pakistanis, rather than if you compare it with us. Obviously, we do not give them what they want so easily. But when it comes to Pakistan, whether it's bases, whether it's control of strategic assets, or if you go by Twitter accounts, then control of nuclear sites in all. So if you go by that, then yeah, I think there's a good amount of goodwill that is increasing, which maybe raising eyebrows back home.
So it's a, yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, these guys will do whatever the US wants, whereas we won't. I mean, we certainly will resist. For example, this whole talk about a base in possibly in St. Martin's Islands in Bangladesh, right? There's all this talk going on. That's not something that is going to be liked by us. Anjali, would you like to comment on that? Because that was raised by Hasina as a probable issue. Have we heard anything further on that? And
Ma'am, I
also the
think
US
nothing is
role in
there.
the corridor. Uh,
I think nothing is there in terms of St. Martin Island officially, and nothing has come out recently. But I think for India, this Bangladesh and Pakistan alignment, it has actually introduced a potential multi-front security concern, especially keeping in mind the eastern borders, as you have mentioned, where Pakistani and Turkish military and intelligence cooperation with Bangladesh can actually complicate India's defense posture. Also, not Saint Martin Island, but also I think that if we talk about the Arakan corridor, again going back, that Yuvvraj mentioned, I think the Arakan corridor is very much a very important critical zone of instability, but also is very potentially a strategic asset if we look into it. And I think for Pakistan, it offers a very direct opportunity to challenge India. If we look into it, I think the Arakan army is heavily involved in the narcotics trade, the yaba tablet or the heroin and everything. So, and which is actually smuggled from Myanmar into Bangladesh and from there into markets across South Asia, including, I think, those accessible to Pakistan linked networks. So, such trade, I think, can generate illicit wealth, benefiting criminal or radical networks in Pakistan as well. So, I think by collaborating with Bangladesh on border security, intelligence, and anti smuggling operation, Pakistan can actually gain strategic insights and can actually influence in Eastern South Asia and counterbalancing India's presence.
okay, I'm going to take one question quickly across all of you all, just 1 minute answers. Basically, what we are seeing is it a US China competition in our neighborhood, or is it a complementarity? Because we can't rule out what people are talking of as a G2, US and China coming together for their own interests, because this government in the US can do anything. So, how do you see this developing, given, however, the basic fact that the US traditionally does never allowed any power to come up to overtake itself? So, you go first, Akashika, just short assessments, and then we'll take questions.
Right. Ma'am, for me, if I look at it from, I'm not Pakistan desk right now. If I look at it from India's perspective, I think this is a competition that is not new. I think it has always existed. It has just been more pronounced with our own activities, our own agendas. But I think the point of the matter and the fact of the matter will always remain that every single power and every single actor involved is doing it in their own self interest, be it however you get whoever you get aligned to, for whatever deal you get aligned to. There have, like Aishwarya pointed out, there is a very rather beautifully done diplomatic threading that is going around, and I believe that's not just Pakistan that is doing it. Every single country involved in this entire game of geopolitics is the one that is doing that. So if you were to ask me, especially if there is a more tilt towards US versus a China, uh, I don't think I'd be able to pick a side, because for me, it is always just everybody treading their own paths in terms of fulfilling their own self-interest at any given point in time. So for right now, if my interests align better with the US, so be it. But 10 years later or tomorrow, if it's better with the China, so be that. That's how I would look at how we're going about things right now.
Actually, that's pretty much what General Munir said today. He said we have equal friendship. It's not at the cost of X, Y, Z. It's not. But that's not. It's not a very easy game to play because just now, Aishwarya, that the Chinese have said that the Chabahar project should be part of CPEC. They're trying to push this whole friendship with Iran into the CPEC mold, and that is certainly not what. Definitely will not be what something the US wants. So your thoughts on that, and then just short.
Ma'am, I actually do tend to agree with what Akashika has said, and you are absolutely right that even during the recent visit, there was talk of linking CPEC infrastructure with Iran. There's a lot of these other projects that are going on. But I think for West Asian countries, particularly, for instance, Iran, it is doing the best it can. It's engaging with China where it needs to. It obviously cannot engage with the US, so it is engaging with Pakistan in that aspect. So I think the US, and if they come together, then if US and China come together, then it means trouble for us, because all these infrastructures are very very nicely linked to each other. There is an Iran China link, there is a Pakistan Iran Turkey link. All are
Mm.
not very friendly countries are connected with each other. Add the US to that. So I don't think that's a very conducive situation for us. But I do think, like Akashika said, that everybody is prioritizing their strategic interests, and they are going to whichever country is able to give them what they need at the current moment. Yeah.
Yeah, but given that every country in international relations, everybody is self-interest, so that is a given. What we're trying to do is read whether this is a kind of a partnership taking place or whether it is competitive. Yuvraj, your thoughts.
Ma'am, if I were to weigh in, I would not rule out G2 completely, because if history has taught us anything, if you look at 70s, that's how US and China reopened their relation. It was through Pakistan, and it was through
Yes.
Kissinger visiting Pakistan and then doing the bidding for Nixon. So it is not something that I would rule out. Considering the two biggest economies, there have to be areas of convergence. There has to be areas of cooperation, whether it's explicit, whether it's implicit, whether it's back channel, whether it's out in the open. I would not rule it out. And ma'am, closing the conversation, I would just say that because the topic of conversation has been Pakistan and its diplomacy and its outreach after Operation Sindoor, I think there are a few things that India and as like our own apparatus can learn from them. First of which is flexibility to deal and to engage with all kinds of people, whether we align with them, whether we align with them morally, whether we do not align with them, whether our interests align or not. But the flexibility and the approach to be open enough to engage with all actors. Secondly, is having a bit of a transactional trait within our own self. If we keep barking up the wrong tree, then I think we should not be expecting different results. So I think, Asim Munir has used think tanks, he has used business circles, he has used other commercial sectors as well. So I think it's something that our own diplomats, our own practitioners can very much include in their actions and in their engagements when done with actors like USA, who like to get pressurized from all sides. If you usually go with them with one tactic, they usually tend to put it down. But if you go from different areas, if you go from different angles, if you explore different angles, US tends to give you something or the other. So yes.
I would actually like to go directly from that into an excellent question in the chat box, which is about the Pakistani spending some 600K in terms of dollars for per month on publicity in the US on PR, whereas we spend about 200K. I mean, that's the figure I get from the. This is so that ties in into what you're saying. Would you like? So it is a huge amount. I mean, that's an excellent question. That's a huge amount of which could partially explain this sudden
Ma'am,
anti-Indian US.
if I may
Yeah.
come in, if you actually look at the people who actually arranged the luncheon between Asim Munir and Trump, it is filled with the Pakistani diaspora who has been living and who has had their roots in the American political system for decades. People like Sajid Tarar, who are Republican-minded Pakistanis, who are more liberal in the sense, but who have also uh, garnered and nurtured those contacts within the American state. So if you look at that, the again I come back to the point of the Pakistani diaspora doing work double time. And yes, so yes, the spending of $600 per month is not just on the visits, official visits, but also on the people. Is investing on the human resources that are present, that are put by Pakistan inside US. So yes, ma'am.
No, no, he's talking of lobbying firms.
Yes, ma'am. So,
Whereas
ma'am, lobbying firms
there are,
are part of
yeah,
part of the caucuses that Pakistan has nurtured through a lot of you know.
yes.
They have gone through a lot, even during the times of 9/11, when they were shunted out of the global sphere. They have continued to maintain those contacts, they continue to maintain those lobbies. And sometimes we feel that our samosa caucus is strong, but if you actually go and have a deep dive of the Pakistani caucus, you will realize that they come from all sectors, they come from all walks of life, and they have a very strong hold, ma'am, as we can actually see.
Anjali, would you say that we should also invest? After this, we'll each of y'all choose a question from the chat box which you'd like to answer. I mean, I leave it to you. Anjali, in terms of not lobbying, but pushing our narrative in Bangladesh, do you think we're doing a good job? Because, how does this, how do we get going with this? Because it is a neighbor and it's a very, very important neighbor.
Ma'am, though I will not say that Bangladesh has completely neglected India, despite expanding its partnership elsewhere. For instance, as you previously mentioned, that Bangladesh's chief advisor Yunus publicly he greeted the Hindu community on Janmashtami in August, and additionally, Yunus has also exchanged cordial letters with PM Narendra Modi, most recently in June 2025. So where both the leaders they are conveying warm festival wishes and reaffirming their commitments to working together for mutual welfare and for regional stability. So I don't think that there is some anti-India sort of situation going on in Bangladesh, though, which is I think very much present in the youth. And overall, if I had to say this, that I'll say that this new phase of Bangladesh, Pakistan, China, or India, I think this represents a major departure from the previous status quo and actually signaling evolving parication in South Asia.
No, but I think overall, I would say our embassies need to be given more freedom to go out and put their messages out, right? Which is where we are failing. I mean, while with the government has done some excellent work, what's Sindoor, I mean, the kind of delivery which was done in terms of Sindoor was amazing. It was out of this world. But that message, that the fact that India did something which few other countries have been able to do, they never, we delivered on these things. It has never got across. So I think that's one message we can take away, that our embassies, our outreach should be much more. So, which I think there are some questions here from General Dushan Singh. There's one: is South Asia seeing a resurgence of US influence and China being resisted to by the countries? Can you put that up?
Ma'am, obviously, ma'am, I think the way Yuvraj mentioned earlier, US's the Rohingya issue or the Arakan corridor or um, uh, the Saint Martin's thing, everything is, I think, US backed. But if I have to put that across, I will not just mention about US, but economically, if we see, I think China and Turkey's growing footprint in Bangladesh is also limiting India's influence in the Bay of Bengal region. Politically, this development has, I think, weakened India's traditional regional dominance as Bangladesh pursues a more autonomous policy. So I think yes, that the US is backed by US for sure.
Okay, there's one question by Akash Krishna Thadani. The FM Pakistan making trips to the US and China is an attempt to reposition himself as a middleman. I think he's agreeing with what you said, Yuvraj. But how, would you like to take that question, Yuvraj?
Ma'am, I think it's pretty obvious, but I think it's not just the field marshal who's making these visits. I mean, they are the highlights, but if you actually see the log, you will see that the Pakistani Air Force chief, the Pakistani commerce minister, there are entire delegations that are going to US. So I think it's not just the high level visits. It's, as I said before, it's the track 2, the track 2.5, the 1.5. It's actually that is laying the groundwork for these high level visits.
Yeah, but when we look at all this, finally we come to the India angle, and we'll close with this, is that if each of you just one line on or two lines, sorry, if you'd like to say on how do we deal with this. You've got Pakistan liaising with the US against Iran, against Afghanistan also. I mean, there is China is trying to get Afghanistan and Pakistan together. There's that trilateral which took place recently. You've got the whole Iran and India have a good relationship. We've got no issues with them. How do you see this playing out? Because Yuvraj, what we should remember is that there are at least 3 US delegations which are due in India this month alone. So there is a working level relationship going on, which I think is important to sort of talk about this. It's not just tariffs. There's a lot of standard work going on. So each of you all one line and we'll close. And how does India? How
Ma'am,
do
I think
we deal with? Yeah.
Ma'am, I think
Yeah. Go
the
ahead.
key word here is being proactive. I think if that's what I mentioned in our last Clause Junior League podcast, was that at times during and after Operation Sindoor, it was not about getting the right message across. It was about getting the message across fastest. The one who was the quickest got the first place, and that's what Pakistan has been trying to do, whether through its official channels or through its back channel diplomacy. So I think one is the speed of our communication. And two is obviously, as I mentioned, the flexibility. So whether the flexibility is of dealing with US or it's a flexibility of our messaging across when it comes to counterterrorism, obviously there can be no flexibility when it comes to counterterrorism. But in the sense, the messaging has to be flexible. We have to be more. We cannot be rigid when it comes to demands, especially when we have a partner like when we have a when we have someone like Trump sitting across the table, because obviously the reports are coming in that even the trade delegation that was supposed to arrive to India on 25th has cancelled. So and they have cited agriculture subsidies, they have cited Indian bureaucratic issues and all of that. So I think that's where the need for flexibility comes in. And
Ma'am, if I
Akashika,
may jump in here, yeah, okay. This is something that I'd wanted to bring up earlier in the panel as well, but just two things that come to my mind. We know, of course, since it is the hot topic here, and we're discussing US and China, and their inlays to all of South Asia currently. But one thing that actually catches my eye, especially, and what Pakistan seems to be doing well, again at the cost of being repetitive, this is something we spoke about in the previous podcast as well. But it is their ability to be able to utilize multilateral forums pretty well as well. So if you go back to, for example, sometime be it the UNSC presidency, or be it something as big as like the Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Pakistan projects, the Trans-Afghanistan projects, or something that catches my eye in June this year, if I'm not wrong, there were statements made by the OIC that you could tell were Pakistan influenced completely. Yes, New Delhi did go ahead and deny those, because the OIC was saying something like the IWT needs to be strictly adhered to, and there's no question about it. And there have been a lot of social marginalization of Muslims in India, so on and so forth. And you can see that the language of all of these texts that come out of all of these forums that are multilateral, multinational, and still seem to have Pakistani influence, which somehow get directed in a bad light towards India. So if that is something that we may also be able to be better at, in terms of leveraging multinational and multilateral forums, instead of primarily just focusing on what happened on X visit between the two countries, because I believe that will also play a major role, first. And second, very briefly, we spoke about soft power. I think that is a very, very relevant thing to remember in today's time. There was there is we'd gone to an event recently at one of these other institutions, wherein the idea of soft power just dawned on me so majorly, because something as basic as what kind of food is served when two kinds of diplomats meet may have long lasting consequences between how the type of relationship those countries have. Not to say that that is precisely the only thing, but the point being that soft power is something, when everybody is talking about weapons and tech deals and so on and so forth, I think soft power is something that cannot be forgotten and should not be unseen. And that is something that we have always been strong at it, but never say never, and can always be better. So
yeah, I'm just wondering in terms of other way. See, primarily the problem is the Pakistan army, right? That is the node of where everything starts. Is there some way? I mean, here I'm going to really go out on a limb. Anyone is free to answer. where you can start messaging to the Pakistani people. Remember, what PM Modi, our Prime Minister, said, the Pakistani people are not our enemies. I mean, this is the problem is the Pakistan army. How do you get this message across to the Pakistanis that look, you're getting taken for a ride by your own army, and that is maybe 0.001% of the population. I mean, I can add a couple of zeros there. It's one tiny little minority within the army which is dominating it for their own benefit. So, any Aishwarya, can you think of some way we can kind of get this message across that look, these guys are making an ass out of you?
Ma'am, I think since this is a Pakistan question, I don't know what the best way would be, but I do agree with what both my colleagues have said, that I think India does need to work on its messaging when it comes to, talking to people, looking at it a little bit from, for instance, the West Asia lens. You've seen in the post-op Sindoor world these leaders of the Pakistani military going and putting the Pakistani perspective on their local TVs, in their local languages, talking to local media. So, we need to work a little bit more on our messaging. We need to put our perspectives out there. And again, I know this is not in response to your question, but you had mentioned earlier our cooperation with Iran. We do have very good relations with Iran, but I think we need to kind of emphasize that a little bit further. We need to get our stall projects out and get the wheels going on that, because that is um, one of our nicest friends in our neighborhood right now. We have good cooperation with them, so I think if we can build on that, it would be beneficial for us. This is my perspective, but I think on your question of how we can get through to the Pakistani public, I think my colleagues are better equipped to handle that. Yeah.
Anjali, on the Bangladesh Republic, I won't put a Pakistan question to you.
Ma'am, I'll just say that India needs to intensify its high level diplomatic dialogue for sure, and also regular leadership visit. If we look into the Unisys tenure till date, I think he's collaborating way too much. He's signing MOUs, he's visiting every possible country that he can. So I think this is actually um, India also needs to do the same to offer concrete development projects, soft loans, as Akashika mentioned about soft power, and also partnership in key sectors such as infrastructure, trade, and also to maybe rekindle kind of people to people ties and cultural diplomacy that will actually help to counter the anti India narratives in between the youth. Also, I think that India must proactively address the historical issue, the water sharing issue, and maybe the perception of big brother behavior, by actually respecting Bangladesh's sovereignty and actually communicating policies transparently. So in short, I'll say that constructive engagement actually, I think, will make India a very preferred partner.
I think that's very well put, Anjali. There's a good point from Mr. Thadani. He says a global soft power projection is sustainable only when you have a powerful military. I think that is actually true. So that is one, but I think that probably holds in your neighborhood, right? So you do have a powerful military vis-a-vis your neighborhood, immediate neighborhood. I mean, we won't go as far as China, but nonetheless, I think I think as another comment from Janadushan Singh, which says expose the generals through foreign media. Yeah, exactly. I think that's a fantastic idea. These guys are minting money. I mean, why can't we put that out in the public? Like I think somebody was telling me also that I think it was Aishwarya, where the Chinese are training Afghan journalists. Right? No, I mean, that's a fantastic idea. You're training people for journalism. Then you reach out to them with your own narrative. A narrative on Pakistan doesn't have to be from within Pakistan, it can be from anywhere. And I think that's a fantastic idea. Expose these people in terms of what they've done. And I think with that, we'll come to the end of this. I think it was a very, very interesting, thought provoking discussions. Thank you to all of you all. And thanks to all our viewers. I hope we all enjoyed it as much as I did. And good night to everybody.
Thank you, ma'am.